Ayli, are you ready?
Ready!
On today's program, we start off with a beginner's guide to Blood Bowl.
Furthermore, where to start, how to play, and more importantly, how to kill the fool that challenged you in the first place!
Fresh boards, fresh kills, fresh meat here on BBSPN. Welcome, coaches, fans, members of all ages. I am Josh.
And I am Ayli. We hear you folks want to learn how to play Blood Bowl.
Yes!
And want to know more?
Yes! Finally, we'll get to go out and play. And what do you mean we can't go out and play? Nurgle's what? When? Over a year now. How many people have it? What do you mean everyone has it? What do you mean I have it? April? Okay, fine, fuck it. Podcast is over. I'm done. We're not doing Blood Bowl. We're not having fun anymore. Where's the noose?
But we have digital tools.
Digital what?
Digital tools.
Like what?
Like Tabletop Simulator.
Okay. What packs do we get on Tabletop Simulator?
There's the I think it's called, is it the Blood Bowl 2020 pack? Is that actually just what it's called?
Yeah, it's just the 2020 Blood Bowl pack. And isn't there a league pitch too?
I think there actually is in that one. I know we have Imperial Nobility and Black Orcs in there, so you actually do get the 2 starter set teams.
Yeah. What else?
It comes with all the dice, all of the other teams, no less.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it has all of the new edition teams. It might be missing some of the later ones from BB 2016, so things like Snotlings and Necromantic might not have made it in there quite yet.
Mm.
I'm actually pulling it up to double check right now.
Oh, I guess we could play some digital games, but I mean, we're here to talk about the new players. So what will they need to know? But what do they need to know basic wise?
So if you're looking at getting into Blood Bowl now with the new edition coming out, which, okay, first off, great choice. It's the best game ever.
Yes.
I forgot to install the pack on my computer, so I got to close Tabletop Simulator again. So you picked a really good time to get into the game because the rules are all different. A lot of people, like a lot of the veteran players, don't really know what the new meta is going to be like, what the new edition is really changing to the game entirely, because they made a lot of changes. So now's a really good time to get in because you're also going to be learning alongside people who've played for a while, but still have to figure out this new environment, so you're not necessarily super far behind everybody else. If that's a thing you're concerned about. Frankly, I wouldn't be concerned about it. But
yeah, so I pulled out some of the new team cards here. What did they need to know from these team cards right off the bat?
So out the bat, if you're fresh, the way that Blood Bowl works is that you have a set of 11 players on the pitch. You can have more on the bench. And acquire more on the bench during the game if you happen to kill somebody, sometimes. What you do is, these characters have different stats. So they have MA, which is movement. That's how many spaces they can move. The strength, which is how hard they hit. It determines how many dice you throw when you're punching that other guy in the face. Agility, how fast you can move, how good you can dodge, your ability to catch the ball. Your armor value, which is how hard you can take hits. And new to this edition is passing. So if you've played Blood Bowl previously, or you played like way back when, and you're just now coming back, they separated out agility from passing. So now passing is its own stat. It is entirely just how good you can huck that pigskin down the pitch.
Now, of course, you're going to need more than just player cards. What else do players need besides what you can find online? Or sorry. That's not right. What kind of equipment do you need? We need dice. We need rule books. You need a team of templates. You need sheets. You need, more importantly, you need blocking dice, because this game isn't just a regular D6. High is good, low is bad. There's actually blocking dice. And if you refer to your lovely rule book, you'll see which ones do what. But essentially, you have a yellow dice, which refers to teams, the attacker knocking down the defending player. Yellow splat with blue border, which means that the defender stumbles unless they have an ability called dodge. They have both down, which is a skull with a small yellow splat. The only time this doesn't result in a both down is if the player has block. Then they have a push, which is exactly as it says. You push a player back one space in three directions. And then you have everyone's favorite and Nuffle's favorite result, skulls, which means the attacker goes down and your turn ends.
Rip. Yeah, so basically what you have is that you have two that knock your opponent over. One of them is situational. Like, one of them, there's some counterplay to it. You have... And I just double checked. The facing is not quite exactly the same on a d6 to a blocking die. It doesn't really line up exactly. You can map it out if you want, but it's not exactly the same.
And blocking dice isn't
Unfortunately.
exactly isn't like other specialty dice. It is very cheap. You can find them everywhere. They're made by both third party and by Games Workshop. Just go ahead and grab a pair while you're there, if you haven't already got some with the starting pack.
Yeah. So basically, what we're there's a lot of like very like special materials in Blood Bowl. The templates that we mentioned, which are basically like things that you have to put onto the tabletop board itself to figure out how something works. Like there's a passing template to mark out range. You don't. I know a lot of miniatures games use like Imperial system, or some heretics use metric for some
Yeah.
for some godforsaken reason. Um, there's a scatter template to see if the ball gets fumbled, like where it lands, and like a kick-in template in case the ball goes into the fans and they have to throw it back because apparently the fans aren't allowed to have fun.
Yeah, they're only allowed to kill. They aren't allowed to play, unfortunately.
Yes. Um, and basically that's kind of like that's the hard and fast version of like understanding Blood Bowl. The game is played over two halves, or two 8-turn halves, where each player gets 8 turns. Um, and it's just about getting that ball into the end zone.
Yep. And that being said, once you grab all these wonderful devices, templates, and another good doodads, you're gonna have to choose a team. Now, unlike other Games Workshop games that you've played, Games Workshop has made it a kind of a staple in this game to have teams that are intentionally bad, intentionally good, or intentionally fun to just kill people with. And
Yes.
this can lead to a lot of confusion because unless you're privy to how a team building works, you're not really going to know where to start. So, with the starter box teams, you'll get two right off the bat. You'll have an entire list for the Black Orcs and the Imperial Nobility. The Black Orcs, I would argue, are the better half, especially if you're trying to learn. It Black Orcs are like Blood Bowl 101. You hit things, you have a kind of good agility player that can pick up the ball, and they like each individual Black Orc can fight by himself very well. So it's really easy to have a position, like not have any position problems, because Black Orc's Black Orc. You can just stand there and pretty much take everything that isn't a big guy on. And then you have the Imperial ability, which is, I would say, more keyed to more experienced players because they have a lot of throwing, they have a lot of teammates with specific abilities, and they're incredibly expensive per player. So you have to know pretty much how to build a team from the get go and what your style is, or the Imperial nobility is going to feel like you're getting kicked in the ass by orcs every single time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So when we say expensive by player, I don't mean like expensive dollar wise.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, Games Workshop figures are expensive, but you can use basically any fantasy, like random fantasy models that you have sitting around, really,
Mm-hmm.
because that's probably how Blood Bowl was originally played.
Yeah.
Um, but so when you draft your team, you have a set budget that you can draft your team with, and each different like type of player has a different like in-game value associated to them.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't go over that budget. And Imperial Nobility have a problem where a lot of their players are very expensive to start. Um, are they a bad team to learn the game with? No. I don't personally recommend. I don't think they're my first choice, but
Mm.
they're a fine team to play. I mean, I've actually been toying around with them a little bit, and they're a lot of fun.
Oh, definitely.
You could do some really nasty stuff to people, but it's one of those teams that in order to get there, you really need to know what you're doing first,
Mhm.
right?
It's kind of like going
So
into a room with a shotgun, like the Black Orcs, but with the Imperial nobility, it's like having an array of weapons at your hand, and you have to know which one to use at the specific time, or you're going to die.
Black Orcs are COD, Imperial Nobility is CS:GO.
Yes. So,
Is that where we've landed?
yes, that is the analogy we're going for. We're going to go with a shooting game analogy for people who are wanting to play a turn-based football game. Anyway,
Excellent. We got there.
that being said, when it comes to the typical team value, which we'll refer to as TV, it's 1,000 TV, and what that essentially means is that your spending limit usually is 1,000,000 coins, and that will translate roughly to a value of TV. But starting off, as long as you're paying attention to your unit allotments, which each character that isn't a lineman can only be taken for so many positions. Like you only have two blitzers normally. There's a lot of different positionals for throwers, catchers, big guys, that lot. So make sure that you're keeping track of the amount of coins you're spending on each player, because a lot of it can catch up to you, especially if you're not paying attention. A lot of there are teams that use a lot of secret weapons or will use different positionals that will just crank up your team value before you know it. So make sure you have even 11 characters to start with, because unless you just want to play well, you can't even play a man down, right? Isn't there a rule where like you have to have 11 characters from the start, and then you have to play with that?
I don't actually know if they changed that. You didn't have to do that before. So
Hmm.
actually, let's talk about some of those things. So if you're an existing player, you're coming from BB 2016 or Blood Bowl 2 on Steam.
Hmm.
Um, there are a fair few changes here. So I mean, the biggest one for you is going to be adjusting to having a dedicated passing stat instead of using
Hmm.
agility. That's a big one. A lot of costs have been changed, and they've added an extra increment on cost. And cost is no longer 10k; it's an increments of 5k on players. So you now have like 125k players instead of just 120 or 130. Um, the way that money works, the way that you get money in league play has changed, and for new players, most of Blood Bowl is played as leagues.
Hmm.
So I would say that really make sure that you're accustomed to or that you like make sure that you read over those parts in your rule book, which is a really big thing actually. Like please read the rule book. There's a
Yes.
lot of rules in this game. It's okay if you forget something, but it's going to be super overwhelming if you don't sit down and read it first.
In fact, another good thing, like I was talking earlier about reference sheets, the quick reference sheet is a godsend, and most
Yes.
even third-party sellers have gotten around to making third-party sheets. Even though Black Orc Down just came out with a fresh new sheet for the latest edition of Blood Bowl, so please make sure you at least have that, and of course your team and dice, so you can when you get into the league, you'll at least understand the pre-match, match, and post sequences, or you will be sitting down for at least half an hour as people try to explain to you all the goodies that happen during a game. Now, speaking of teams, we have a list of teams that are going to be brought to your attention that we feel, besides the starter box teams, which we feel are solid, that we feel could be picked up, especially if you're planning on going into a league that will at least be a good starting ground for your collection. And by starting ground, I mean which teams are going to teach you the most. Now, Eiley, I see you have a bunch of knife-eared bitches, but why choose the Dark Elves and the Elven Union? Like, why elves and humans primarily?
Yeah. So should be said before we go on though that if you got the starter box is a really good buy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just starting out and you have absolutely nothing, just buy the starter box.
Yes.
Just just buy the starter box. You got the rule book, you get the board, you get two teams, two sets of dice, all the templates. You get complete rosters, which is kind of a big thing because a lot of these teams have positionals that you only get like 2 of them in a box and you can have up to 4. You get all the positionals. You even get the big guys. So if you're somebody who looks at Blood Bowl, you're like, oh man, I want to kick somebody's ass with an ogre.
Hmm.
Ha ha ha.
Yeah,
You get the ogre
and that
and a
is.
troll. You can throw people.
Mhm. And that is a big thing. Before the latest edition of Blood Bowl came out, most teams didn't have all the key players that, one, you need to actually be competitive, and two, that make the game fun. Like, for instance, the goblins. You don't get any special weapons when you get the goblin team. You just have a bunch of gobos. And yes, seeing gobos fly around with their limbs torn off is funny, but it only becomes funny after a couple matches. Eventually, you're going to want to be the one that does the ass kicking. So, if you're looking for the starting point, it has to be the start collecting box. Hell, like it is almost like no contest that the starting box is the best place to start.
Yep.
But anywho, I see it first up here.
Uh,
You have Dark Elves. Give me the reason
I'm
why
actually
you
gonna go with
chose them, and tell me where the heck, what is the team composition for them?
so Dark Elves are a team that's coming in actually kind of strong in the new edition. I think they're fine. I don't know if they're as good as they used to be, but what you have is you get 1 witch elf, 3 blitzers, 7 linemen, and 2 team rerolls, which comes in at exactly your budget, at exactly your starting budget for league play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the big reason I picked Dark Elves is that Dark Elves were already like a pretty strong team last edition. They're very good for beginners because they have high mobility, so they can move around the pitch very quickly. And if you get in a bad spot, you can kind of reposition. I mean, it's still risky. You're still rolling dice,
Mm-hmm.
and the possibility there is to fail, and the price of failure is your turn ends. But if but they are a team that is forgiving enough with their positionals that you can get away with more, or you can afford to make mistakes without ending the game on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Because Blood Bowl sometimes has a tendency to snowball. Um, Blood Bowl is one of those games where you have to realize that it's a somewhat masochistic.
Yeah.
It is a perfectionist's game. But
Yeah. Another good thing about Dark Elves is that they have very good starting stats, and while they do lean on the expensive side, again, just cost per gold per player. Like the Imperial Nobility, they 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 can reposition and they don't die as often as other agility based teams, which actually rolls on to your next team, the Elven Union.
hold on
Normally,
here.
I wouldn't recommend so many elf teams to someone, but why has the Elven Union moved up in terms of starting teams?
So I mean I think that we can actually kind of combine these a bit.
Oh yeah.
So for the other, so one of the big reasons that I like Elven Union is that they have a lot of the positionals that you just generically need to play, like that teams generically have to play Blood Bowl. You get a
Mm-hmm.
thrower, you get a catcher, you get 2 blitzers, and you get 7 linemen and 3 rerolls at
Mm-hmm.
975k, which means that you could afford to buy 2 dedicated fans. If you're coming into league play, you probably need to spend some money on dedicated fans because it's how you acquire money faster. Because the more popular your team is in your league, the more money you get. And what we mean by that is
Mm-hmm.
you can start off with dedicated fans, who are like people who are already a fan of your team. And as you win games, you can acquire more fans, and if you lose games, you lose more fans. So that affects how much money you get at the end of every game. So if you want to build up a bank, you need to really buy fans. Please buy fans. There's a bit of a debate going on about whether or not it should be that, or if it should be like how much TV should you actually have on the pitch. I am of the mindset that you can do both and be fine. The big reason, like, so I'm combining Dark Elves and Elven Union here because they're two very different teams, but they kind of have the same thing going on. You have 4 agility. You have like positionals that play the game well. Like they just have a good
Mm-hmm.
stat line to play the game with, and they teach you the mechanics of the game. Sure, Dark Elves are not really exposing you to throwing. Your best passing stat is on the runner, who I have curiously left off of this roster. So on the Dark Elf roster, you can get linemen, you can get up to 2 runners, up to 4 blitzers, 2 assassins, Yes,
Mhm.
really. You get people who run around and just stab people, and 2 witch elves. Um, so when you're playing dark elves, what you're doing is that you're using your blitzers to kind of secure safe blocks. They have a skill called block that says that they don't get knocked down if both players would go down to a block. Instead, they stay standing, which is good because that means
Mhm.
that's one more die roll that you could use to kick your opponent's ass with.
Exactly.
The witch elves are good for what we like to call surfing. It's when there's a player that's standing close to the side, like close to the edge of the pitch, you push them off the pitch, and then the crowd gets to eat them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're
Yay!
not talking about
Feed the
waves here.
poor.
We're not talking about waves of sea salt. We're talking about waves of human orc and beastman flesh coming down upon the poor player that leaves the pitch and getting the shit kicked out of him.
Yes.
Now your third team, humans. Now, before we go into humans, we need to emphasize
Slow down there a bit, Josh. Slow down a bit.
there needs to be it needs to be said that the Imperial Nobility team and the human teams are two different teams. Don't get confused. There are a
Don't
lot
get
of
confused by
teams.
that.
Well, that's what they are. They are two separate entities. You can get a human team, and then there's the Imperial Nobility team. It's like saying I want a group of like the shoppers at Trader Joe's, or do I want the U.S. Senate? Yes, they're humans, but one's bougie and the other one is normal people.
We're not even
Now,
done talking about elves yet.
oh, we're not done talking about elves. What else we to talk about
No,
elves?
and
I don't want.
unfortunately not, because the other thing the first thing you do is that always kill the elves. Second point.
Yeah.
So when you're you are very eager.
Yes. Very.
Yes, very.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're doing like the big thing that dark elves are missing is that you don't have a lot of ball play. You're not very good at passing. Okay, that's fine. You don't have to
Mm-hmm.
be good at passing to play Blood Bowl. Um, but this roster gives you a solid set of positionals that as they develop, you're going to learn more about like developing your team because dark elves develop incredibly well. I mean, the first thing that you're going to want to buy out the gate is your apothecary, which is that thing that tries to save your life when you have like I don't know a foot stuck in your torso or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Something equally awful. After you get that, you might want a third reroll. It's hard to say. Um, Rerolls are an important resource, and you're going to have to manage them very carefully as a new player with this team specifically. But if you get the next reroll after that, I would spring for the second Witch Elf because you really want to end your season with both Witch Elves. They are some of your best players. Oh, get the fourth Blitzer too. I forgot. They actually get 4 Blitzers. So yeah, get your fourth Blitzer, then get the Witch Elf because the Blitzers are probably going to develop a little bit better or
Mm-hmm.
develop faster early on. If we go to Elven Union, you have the same amount of players. You're down a blitzer and you get a catcher and a thrower instead, and you get an extra reroll, which leaves you at 975, so you can buy 2 dedicated fans, like we talked about. The biggest issue with this team is that it's a little bit less resilient. Your players aren't armored as much.
Mm-hmm.
You only get 2 blitzers. You can't get more than 2. You only get 2. They still have block, which is nice. They have the same like stat or the same skills. Sorry, not stats as a dark elf blitzer. You don't get the witch elf because but what Elven Union does is it plays a game vaguely reminiscent of football.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like it plays football. So it's going to feel maybe a little bit more familiar or a little less daunting cuz you're learning the game's rules, but you're not trying to use players that very specifically do not look like that they would play a game of football, right? Like a witch elf like kicking people off the pitch is maybe more of an abstract concept than throwing the ball. So if you want to just like really ease your way into it, I like Elven Union. You're gonna take a lot of injuries is the problem. They don't have a lot of armor and they're not very good at standing up.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get punched in the face, it's gonna hurt a lot.
Definitely.
The team that I think is the best for new players right now, though, is the aforementioned humans. I think humans are probably one of the biggest winners out of the new coming into the new edition. Um, so you get the roster that I recommend is not one that you can do out of one box. You're gonna have to get 2 boxes, and then another purchase on top of that. But I think it's probably the best team to start in Blood Bowl right now. It is 4 blitzers, a thrower, a catcher, an ogre, 4 linemen, 3 rerolls.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So human variant teams tend to get 4 blitzers. So that is 4 guys that get to run around beating the crap out of your opponent. They develop very, very well. The skills that you can put on them are very good because different player types have different skills that can go on their players. So blitzers in particular tend to develop pretty well just on any team. I like the human ones in particular because I'm partial to teams that have 4 blitzers. That's just a playstyle choice. You
Mm-hmm.
get the thrower, who's one of the best throwers in the game because he throws on a 2-up, which means that you roll a d6, and if it's a quick pass, so the shortest it can be, it's on a 2.
Okay.
And he has a skill that says that he re-rolls his first failed pass.
Mm-hmm. Which is a
So
8% fail rate, which is the best set of chances you're going to get with any throw.
yes, I think that's actually correct. Now, granted, the longer that pass gets, that passing stat's going to go up. Like, it might be a 3-up or a 4-up, but he still is starting as one of the best passers in this game. You have good armor across the board.
Mm-hmm.
It's average armor, but that's more than what I could say about the Elven Union. The Elven Union start low on the armor side, which is an important thing to think about. But you get the thrower, you get the catcher, you get the 4 blitzers. You're starting out with like every positional type that you would need to familiarize yourself with.
Yes.
And I think that makes humans one of the best teams. Like, humans are probably one of the teams I'm going to be playing a lot of in the new edition. Because this roster looks very, very strong. And you still have 20k, you have 25k left over, and fans are 10k each. So you can buy 2 more dedicated fans, and you could start building up that bank account a bit faster. You have an ogre too,
Yes.
which is really important because humans in the new edition get access to halflings now. Halflings are these little pint-sized. They're basically what are they? Hobbits? Yeah, they're basically hobbits. Which means that they're small enough that your ogre can throw them.
Yes.
So you also have 1-turn touchdown potential, which is really important. That is to say that what you do is you get the ball, you hand it off to the halfling, who's standing next to the ogre. You throw the halfling, and then the halfling just runs it into the touchdown.
Now,
It's actually a really good thing to just have offhand, in case you only have 1 turn to actually score, or like your opponent scores on their last turn and it only gives you 1 turn to tie up the game. It's really important. Um,
Ayli, when it comes to the halflings, they aren't like the ones you can get in the Old World Alliance teams. They don't have animosity towards the ogres, right?
right, they don't have animosity towards humans. So there's another team that is a mix of humans, dwarfs, and halflings. And the halflings there are racist.
Well, actually,
they
everyone
don't
there is
like
racist.
they don't like hanging out with ogres and humans and stuff. But these ones are perfectly fine. So you might need to go and find some tiny little thing to represent a halfling. I recommend a quarter. Because let's be honest, he's pint sized and he's getting flattened anytime he gets blocked anyway.
Yeah, if you find someone who's good enough at freehand on bases, you can pretty much just paint a dead halfling on a base, and eventually that base will become your halfling. So
Yeah.
now,
So I made very like conscious choices of like these are teams that teach you the mechanics. I think you went the exact opposite direction.
oh yes, for certain. Ayli's teams are great if you want to experience everything there is about Blood Bowl, just in a team, really. And in fact, besides the humans, you get everything you need from those teams just in their starting boxes. But my teams focus more on what I believe is the core of Blood Bowl, which is grabbing the ball once the entire enemy team is dead. Speaking of dead, my first team I would like to recommend to our listeners is the Undead team. Well, I say why? Well, it's pretty simple. They kill things, and then you get more players out of it. You get this wonderful necromancer who is more than happy to sit on the sidelines, wait for one of your enemy's teammates to die, and depending on your role, you get a lineman back. And depending on if you're playing league, you get to keep that dude so long as you spend a little bit of gold on the side. So essentially, what you want to do to get to the killing and making your enemies your friends is having a ghoul, 2 whites, which are your blitzers, 2 mummies, which are your big guys. They're strength 5, and unlike ogres or trolls, they don't have loner or stupid. So you can actually move them around effectively without having to worry about them being too stupid to move their legs. The the funny thing about undead is that the most controversy comes from, do you take 2 ghouls or what your lineman composition comes on, because you can get zombies or skeletons. Now, zombies are a, what was it, 8 armor. They are their movement is 4, and they get regenerate. They're essentially slower, but they can take getting knocked out or an injury and come back. Skeletons are faster, but they only have 7 armor, and but they do have thick skull. Now, thick skull just means that if you roll an 8, which would normally be a knockout, it actually turns into a stun instead. So they're quicker and they'll stay on the field more, unlike the zombies who will be knocked off the field, but only on a higher roll, but they can come back from an injury. So it is the changes are minor, but you really won't understand which ones you want until you actually play with them yourself. I recommend starting off with a higher number of zombies, simply because I like having units that can just come back, even if it's the enemy's units, as long as they're on my team. Uh, and they have a variety of skills. For instance, the ghoul, fast and has dodge, perfect ball carrier. The whites are just solid blitzers, just in general. And like I said, you don't have no poopy stupid linemen, not linemen, poopy stupid big guys who just sit there and roll ones and just look stupid the entire time.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah,
to clarify here, a lot of big guys in Blood Bowl have a thing where they have to roll a die before they do something. Otherwise, they forget where they are and they just kind of stand there drooling. Mummies don't have that problem. You just get to slap people all day.
Exactly. And even with a full roster, which will be around 12 players, you can get 3 rerolls and still have 25k. Oh Jesus, 25k left. It is just a cost-effective team all around. You may not have you may not be able to do certain tasks as good as the elves or the humans, but they punch and they deal in death. That is the undead team, and they do it very well. And I highly recommend them.
Yeah, if you
Along
want
the
a
other
team that
teams
can
I have on
remove
this
players.
list, I recommend.
Yeah, if you want a team that can remove players from the pitch, highly recommend Undead. Because Undead at low TV can do it much better than just about every other team.
It just slaps.
Well, every other team that we have here.
Yes. Now,
Maybe not Black Orcs.
now, at the risk of being shot by certain people in the Blood Bowl community, I am going to recommend dwarves next. Now, I know you. I can literally hear the amount of motion being created by the eyes being rolled by this, because, of course, dwarves right now, for those who don't know, are really, really, really good. Their linemen have almost all of the dwarves have block, and almost all the dwarves have, what is it? Is it tackle or trip? Whichever.
Yeah, it's they all have thick skull.
Yes.
Which is not as big a deal, but a lot of the linemen have block, or sorry, the linemen have tackle.
Yes.
So you have a lot of tackle on this team.
So, and their armor value is even for linemen is a 9 up. So
10 up. 10 up on the lineman.
Oh, that's right. It's a 10 up on the lineman.
The shirtless guy, 9 up. Just as much armor as that armor wearing human, and more armor than the armor wearing elf. Because apparently it's either a 6-pack or a keg. He's probably got the keg going, to be honest.
But they are strong. They all fight well, and they all have really high armor. The only downside to them is that they don't move as well, but they still move pretty darn well. As I say this, the composition that you should run when you're starting, in my opinion, is 2 Troll Slayers who are kind of like the Witch Elf, just fatter. They don't move as well. And
The
unlike
fatter, shorter,
are more
and the Slayers hate elves.
and the more elf hating Troll Slayers, the difference between the Slow Slayers and the Witch Elf, besides being slower, is that they have a skill called Dauntless. And Dauntless essentially means that if you're facing someone who has a higher strength than you, depending on a roll that you make, you can make your strength equal the strength of the higher as the player with the higher strength. So if you're bring your Troll Slayer up to an actual troll and you succeed in the Dauntless roll, your Troll Slayer now has the same strength as that troll. So if you put another player next to that troll, you can get a 2 die on most of the big guys on the league. And it's not foolproof, but it is reliable. It can be done. And they also have frenzy, so if depending on your positioning, which is another thing I need to get into, you can then hit them again or push them again and surf them. So the blitzers are just really good blitzers. You don't really have to talk about them that much, save for the fact that they have better agility. And then you have your runner, which is the only dwarf that doesn't have block, but it has sure hands. So now you can actually pick up the ball and also fight very well and also have really high armor.
Because the
And
dwarves,
basically just have an answer for everything on the field, which is why dwarves are hated so much and why they're used so much.
yeah. So the
Yeah.
big thing about dwarfs is that basically what you are is that you are a slow rolling. You are your team. You're playing less of a team and more of a wall,
Mm-hmm.
like a sentient, sapient wall that
Yes.
punches people. Because it's really hard to get away from a dwarf team when they've really got themselves stuck in there. They're very slow, so you're gonna have to position yourself in a way to protect your ball when you get it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like you really need to protect your ball carrier because your ball carrier is the most important player that you have, and you only get one of them. Well,
Now,
you get one of them to start. You can get a second one later on. But oh my gosh,
yes.
you are a slow rolling machine of death. So if you like the idea of undead, but you're like, you know what? I want to be more I want to lean less away from like the teaching me the fundamentals and more just be like, I want to infuriate everybody in the store.
Yes.
Play dwarfs.
This is to those who play Warhammer games but not Blood Bowl. Playing dwarves is kind of like playing Imperial Knights or playing just a large, or just a pug stompy team, just a team that just removes new players. Dwarves are just infuriating because they are automatically good and they just they can fight just about anything. That being said, the one very small chink in the dwarves' armor is their positioning themselves. You are a wall. So if someone finds a way past this wall, that's it. They're going to score. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Unless you're willing to take a bunch of GFIs, which we'll get into, you are going to you're going to have to make sure that wall is maintained, or you will lose. And most of the experienced players know how to get past a wall when you make them. So don't expect to just be slapping the entire time with dwarves, just most of the time.
I can't wait for the anti dwarf star player with secret weapon ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
stilts. It's just like do 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 do.
Yeah.
It's gonna walk over you.
But
And he gets absolutely clobbered because they're dwarfs.
yes. So that being said, you take the one runner, you take 6 linemen who are also good. Against some people say take a death roller. Please don't take the death roller. Not yet. Death roller is when you've made a lot of money. You're just like, you know what? I'm gonna put a death roller up in here. It is
For people wondering what a death roller is, it's
the-
basically a lawnmower of doom.
it is the doom mower. It is the doom mower. High strength. It has juggernaut, which means that you can reroll.
No, he turns both downs into
Oh,
pushes
that's
on
right.
the
It
list.
took both downs to push. That's right. It's not brawler, but it is still good. It is big. It is glorious. And if you look at the model for it, you're going to want one. Just hold off for right now. You don't need to kill everyone just yet. You need to learn the game. Save the death roller for when you are ready for it. And then my last team is Black Orcs, which we already went over before. Black Orcs are great. You get every single positional that you need from the starter box, and they're good. Period. End of story. I don't really need to go into it. You take 6 Black Orcs troll, 5 bruisers or goblins, and 2 rerolls, and you're still at 955k for some reason.
I
So
feel like we
go
did
ahead.
that math wrong. I'm gonna double check that
Yeah,
math.
go ahead and check
Hold
that
on, I don't
math.
believe you. You've never been one for math.
All right. Now,
Uh,
while Ayli's looking
not
for
that I'm
this
on,
stuff, I'm
but
going to keep going on forward. Uh, for teams you shouldn't take, what shouldn't you be investing into? Well, the first one's pretty obvious. Since Blood Bowl has teams that are intentionally bad, um, primarily when we talk about intentionally bad teams, we mean stunty teams. If you look at some of the rosters, whether online or in the book, you'll see that some rosters have a bunch of players with a ability or unique ability called stunty. Now, stunty is good for when you want to dodge and run away and move with the ball, but it is havoc when you are being punched in the face, which is what most of Blood Bowl is. It makes means they have barely little armor, and every single unit that has stunty is about half the size of a regular unit, half the strength, and just gets eradicated. Um, the teams that are primarily made of stunties are goblins, halflings, ogres, ironically, and lizardmen. Now, you may say, but ogres or lizardmen are very strong, very tough boys. That's true, but they rely on their stunty units to carry the ball, or at least at some capacity, they need that positional taken. And that position isn't exactly going to help if everyone who is stunty is dead, which happens very often, especially with new players.
this section has been edited because Josh is an idiot. He meant to say snotlings are the other stunty team you need to avoid, but I think that this also warrants discussion about what a stunty team is. So when Blood Bowl players say stunty teams, they mean teams comprised primarily of stunty players. So Black Orcs and Lizardmen are not a stunty team. Do they have stunty players? Yes. But Black Orcs also can only have to field 4 of them minimum, as opposed to Goblins who would have to field 10 minimum. Goblins are a stunty team, and Snotlings are a stunty team. The complete list of those, again, is halflings, goblins, ogres, and snotlings. We now return to our regularly scheduled raving about Blood Bowl.
So stay away from stunty teams just yet.
Yeah. I fixed the math of the Black Orcs, by the way.
Okay.
If you do 6 Black Orcs, a Troll, and 4 of the Goblins, which you really only need 4, you probably don't need to build a bench out the gate.
Yeah.
You get the 2 rerolls, and then it's 955, which is good, because you want those 4 fans.
Mm-hmm.
Because this team can snowball really fast.
Oh, incredibly fast.
It's just an overall really good team. You have 7 guys who are really good at punching things, and like 4 guys who have to pick up the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Your 2 halves don't play together very well, but oh my gosh, is the punchy side really good, and is the ball carry side like really hard to pin down?
Yes. Now, another group of teams you shouldn't take are anything that has low armor with a high skill ceiling. And this is essentially me describing the Wood Elves. Wood Elves are the pinnacle of high risk, high reward. You have the War Dancer, which is arguably one of the best units in the game, and he is protected by a bunch of low armored elves that die incredibly fast. And if you lose your War Dancer, you pretty much lost your team. So stay away from them. Uh, I know I've argued about this before. Nurgle, they're fun,
Yeah.
they're punchy, but they have something called, they have a wonderful skill. It's not called Rod. It's called.
I think it's called Decay.
Yeah,
I think it's
decay. That's exactly what it is. They have decay. So essentially, what decay means is that you roll twice on the injury table if one of your Nurglings get injured, or any of your people on your team get injured, and they have to take both results. And if one of those results is them getting dead. They're just dead.
It's
And
just the
said,
linemen.
yeah. Oh, it's just the lineman.
It's just the linemen. But that being said, Nurgle has the problem of being super slow like the dwarves and nowhere near as good as punching things early on. Like
Yes.
low, like 1000 TV Nurgle is not a very good team, but it takes a lot of work to get there.
Yes.
Uh, then we have the one that I begrudgingly will say, because I
Mhm.
love this team to death, but it's really not one that you should learn with. Do not start with Old World Alliance.
Yes.
You basically get to play a team of a bunch of different races, and everybody there is racist.
Yes.
That's what it is. That's
So
literally just what it is.
the racism we're talking about is a skill called animosity, and it gives a negative modifier to when you use a teammate from another race to assist another teammate, either in passing, handing off the ball. You still get your bonuses of blocking. However, it is infuriating because not only do they have animosity, they also have loner. And loner means that if they fail at something and you try to do a reroll, they have to do a 4-up skill pass before you can even use the reroll, or rather, to use the benefits of a reroll. You'll still spend your reroll whether you fail it or not. So,
Yeah.
unless you are very well versed on how to use each individual model of your overall alliance out the gate, you're going to experience what it's like to deal with players who have in abundance extraordinary skills that suck.
Yeah, so the problem is that the humans have the human linemen don't have animosity for anything. They have no
Right.
skills, which is nice. The thrower and the catcher have animosity for dwarves and halflings.
Hmm.
Um, and the human blister does too. The halfling has animosity for dwarves and humans.
Hmm.
The dwarfs don't have animosity. They just have loner, so they suck at their job. Now the
Yeah.
good news is that I mean, like all those players are kind of resilient, so they don't really need to use their rerolls anyway. But it's one of those things of you really need to be familiar with how Blood Bowl is played and what the different teams do. So this is not a team that you pick up to learn the game with. This is a team that you pick up because you've got the rules down, you've played in a league or two, and you understand the position. You understand like the positioning game and all that, and you're like, okay,
Yeah. It is
I
a
want to try this like crazy wacky team.
mm. It is a very unique challenge, and that being said, a unique challenge is not something starting players want to do. Now,
Yeah,
Blood Bowl, of course, is a brutal game, but we encourage everyone to just enjoy the carnage, or like we like to say, follow Nuffle. And Nuffle is a very spiteful, hateful god who hates all of us equally. And he also loves all of us equally. So when you have a bad game or have just a bad experience in general, remember, it's not the opposing coach that's trying to ruin your day. It's just Snuffle. He does that.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And are there things that you could do to be an asshole? Yes. Don't do
Yes.
those things. Don't be an ass.
Don't be an
Be
ass.
excellent to each other. That's not just a movie reference.
That is the unofficial motto for BBSPN. Actually, is don't be an ass. There's
Don't be an ass.
the sport's already an ass. We don't have to be them one also.
I don't
So
know. I play Skaven in Amazons. I
yes.
might be. I might actually be an ass.
So
um, actually, hold on here. Just if the, so, like those are like our recommendations, like the things that you should avoid. That being said, you can probably learn if there's a team that's like not stunty and that we didn't name. You can probably still learn the game playing it just fine. I
yes.
mean, like you like the look of Necromantic with the werewolves. You can learn to play Blood Bowl with that just
Yeah.
fine. If you like the look of orcs, you could do that. Well, it might be harder or easier depending on like what you do, but these are just teams to get your bearings with, and then to help you figure out what you like doing.
Hmm.
So then you can find more
Exactly.
teams in it because this is one of those games where we're gonna have multiple teams probably. I've yet to meet somebody who has one team. I think I have 7 on the tabletop right now. It might be 8 pretty soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Please also be a decent hobbyist. Don't just get a bunch of teams saying I want to do this, this, and this team. Please at least have one team assembled before you keep getting more teams. The allure of, as we in the business call, plastic crack is very strong. The new Blood Bowl models and even some of the old ones are very nice looking. Just hold off and play the game a little bit before you start stacking teams because they're very stackable. Boxes stack very easily, especially if they're thrown into a closet.
Especially if they're small, like Blood Bowl.
Especially if they're small.
You can like fill a cupboard with them.
Right. That being
That'd be
said,
so
we need
great.
Yeah.
You go to get a cup and you're like, oh wait, right, that's my unassembled Blood Bowl team cupboard. Shut that.
Yeah. All right. That being said, we need to play that end theme. Thank you for listening to us babble about for our first episode. We
the
have
hard and fast guide to Blood Bowl for new players, because we just like blitzed through that. Is there some information that you could still learn and look up that's free? Definitely, but this is a very fast, brief, very just let's hit you in the face with everything at once, because for some reason we thought that was a good idea.
Yeah. Well,
I've never claimed to be intelligent, mind you.
We are intelligent, but we are fanatical, and Warhammer praises us for doing so. Anyway. We have links for both Twitter, Instagram. It's trash, but it's our trash, so we like to promote it. We have links for Fumble and to all of the packs in the Steam Workshop. Just keep in mind that when it comes to Tabletop Simulator, the amount of content that gets removed from that game is about the same as the amount of content that gets added. So if you can't find what we link, there is definitely a Blood Bowl 20 pack lying around somewhere that you can grab.
I think it's the Blood Bowl League pitch is what it's
exactly.
called. This has Blood Bowl 2016 rules references, so you're probably going to need to make the you're going to have to like fix that on your own with the rulebook. Because there are some pretty important skill changes and stuff, so that you really want to make sure, like, while the name changed, what the skill does is different. But for some reason, GW decided to keep those skills on those players anyway.
Exactly.
So be sure that you read very carefully. You might get blindsided.
Yeah.
If you use like an out-of-date thing.
Yep. And as always, thank you for listening. And now we have to flee because the amount of nurglings outside is starting to alarm me, as it has gotten to the window.
Oh shit! Wait, did we not install windshield wipers on our windows?
No, I thought let's just get out of here. They're coming in. They're smiling. They're playing their stupid little harps.
I think one of them is picking their nose.
Oh no, that one's picking his butt. It just looks like a nose. Anyway, let's just get out of here.
It's also on his face.